How you doing, guys? This is Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. This video is going to be about the survival and prepping lessons that can be gleaned from the original Shit Hit the Fan movie, Panic in Year Zero. I think this was 1962. Every time I hear the title to this movie, I think of that Ghost song, Year Zero. And it's actually black and white, which I'm not sure exactly what percentage of movies were colored at that time, but they certainly have, colorized movies then. And but this one may have been done this way for effect, may have just been cheaper, who knows. Doesn't really detract from the movie in any sense. And just so you know, I am going to be talking about the movie pretty detailed, so a lot of spoilers. If you want to watch the movie, go watch it before watching this video. And if you're interested in just movie commentary in general, my girlfriend and I have a movie podcast called Faint Praise, where we compare movies of similar themes and then rate them. You can find a link to that in the description below. But this is going to specifically be about the thoughts and lessons and things that we can glean from the fictional, scenarios presented in the movie. Everyone always gives me shit about stuff like, oh, it's a movie, trying to learn from a movie. Yes, I know the movies are fake, but it still is a good way to jumpstart thought processes on situations that may or may not occur in real life. I mean, obviously you can look at a situation with like a zombie and say, okay, this isn't going to occur in real life, but it can make you think, what would I do if I had to move through an area with, hostile forces, or what would I do if I had to shelter myself from a nuclear fallout and things like that. So just because the movie itself may not be 100% realistic doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of things that you can learn or at least formulate your thought processes for in the future. And I think that's the most important part, is not necessarily learning specific lessons, but just getting yourself thinking about this stuff so that when it happens in real life, if it happens in real life, it's not the first time you've thought about it. You've at least run through this scenario before. You're going to be able to act much more quickly. You'll be able to have already planned out different courses of action, and you can just implement them instead of having to figure them out on the spot. So this movie is about a family that's about to go on vacation of some kind of camping trip, it appears, and they're in California, somewhere near the LA area, and they leave, and shortly after they leave, they notice a giant mushroom cloud, and they start to realize that a full-blown nuclear war has broken out between the United States and unnamed aggressor. It's, probably supposed to be the Russians or something, but they don't specifically say, maybe multiple countries. And this movie is, it has the cheesiness and things that you would normally get in a movie this old, and the total lack of special effects and things like that. But the main advantage, or the best part about this movie, is that it does a great job of dealing with like the psychological aspects of being in these situations. And I would say that the main theme of the movie, or one of the main themes at least of the movie, is kind of what level of like society and civilized behavior do you maintain in the face of a survival situation where it's either you or them kind of stuff. So, and there's a lot of great quotes in this movie. I'll try to mention as many of them as I can throughout this review, but there's some fantastic quotes in this movie, and it really is one of the better survival Shit Hit the Fan movies out there, despite the fact that as a movie, it's fairly, just a goofy old movie. It's not a lot of special effects, not a lot of what we would consider action by today's standards, but they do a great job of dealing with these themes in the movie in fairly realistic ways as far as I'm concerned. So starting out in the movie, it's obviously they're in a better position than most, being that they're planning on going on a fairly, roughing it type of trip. They have a camper that he's towing behind the car. He's shown with a fishing rod. They presumably have other types of like camping and outdoor living type supplies, at least a little bit of food and things like that, you would presume. And we later find out, in the movie, that they have portable chairs and camping and at least some cooking equipment and things like that. They do go to a hardware store later, so I'm not sure exactly what they were supposed to have had versus what they got there. But the fact that they were going on a camping style trip with a RV type trailer is going to put them in a lot better of a situation than most other people would have been in, even than they would have been in on just a random day somewhere. So that put them in a good position. And just a few minutes into the movie, I think it's like 5 or 6 minutes in, they see the mushroom cloud. They immediately realize that something serious has happened, but they don't know how widespread it is. It's also interesting to note how, tenuous communication was, even in as recently as the early 60s is that without, if the radio didn't work, you had no way to communicate. You had to stop and use a payphone, and if those lines were down, there was nowhere else to get any information other than word of mouth. So it's a really isolated feeling that a lot of people aren't used to these days. I think it would be very jarring for most people to go from the current state we live in with the internet, portable phones, all sorts of stuff like that, much more radio stations and satellite radio and all that stuff, to be plummeted back into a situation like that. Because even for them, it was a little bit jarring and discombobulating to lose all the forms of communication that they had. And it was still, their daily lives are a lot closer to that state than ours are now. So I think people would be a lot more, definitely caught off guard by that than somebody living in the early 60s would be. They pretty quickly decide that they want to go back to where they came from, cancel the trip, even though I don't know if they know this at the time, but they're heading back towards LA, which is the site of the at least one of the attacks. They get to a gas station, and this is the very beginning of people starting to realize that things are going wrong. And a guy doesn't have money for gas, so he punches the attendant and then drives off. And the attendant asks him, "Why? You could have stopped him." And he says, "My mom did," or what did he say?
Hell, you could have stopped it.
My mother didn't raise me to be a hero, not for $4.
Which I thought was a hilarious line. And there's a couple other good lines in this movie too. But it shows you that you have to be ready. Obviously, like I said, it's fictional, but it does bring up the possibility even early on in a situation, some people are going to panic. Even if it ends up not being serious, some people are going to think that it is. So you have to be ready for that type of behavior, even if you don't think it's serious or happen to know that it's not. Other people might not be of that same mindset. So you have to be ready from the first signs of something maybe going wrong. You have to be ready to deal with that sort of behavior. So they swing by a little diner to try and get some food, and it's overrun with people leaving LA, and they pretty quickly determine that they're not going to be able to get anything there. The father decides to continue with the trip, basically to go to this rather remote spot and just hang out there for a while, which I think is a smart decision in that situation. I always talk about bugging out as being something you do when you have to do it, and not just, oh, something's happening, let me just leave and go somewhere. That only works if you have a specific bug out location. But in this situation, they did have a specific location that they're already planning on going to. They knew how to get there. They knew what they were, at least generally what was going to be waiting for them there. Under normal circumstances, they had the gear, and they knew that the situation that they were leaving, LA, was not tenable. They couldn't go back there. So he says something about, how that's the only thing safe right now. They can't go back to LA. And his wife says, like, oh, if you want to scare me, you're doing a good job. And he's like, being scared is a good way to be right now, or something along those lines, which is a pretty good quote. Again, like I mentioned, there's some decent quotes in this movie. And that's true. It's like I just mentioned, you have to be in a mindset. You don't want to be terrified, but you have to be aware of the possibilities. And that's going to come with a healthy amount of fear as well, but you just have to be able to deal with that and not let it overcome you, like obviously some people will. Another element in that surfaces frequently in this movie is the difference between the family members and how they react to the situation, where the son is super reliable and resilient and pretty much is on board with the program right off the bat, and the wife is totally upset by the whole situation, going so far as to almost sabotage them purposefully, which I'll get to later, which comes back to haunt them. But when he takes the guns from the guy at the hardware store, he actually ends up getting into a scuffle with the guy, and the son immediately comes up and helps him out, holds a gun on him, lets him get away. And so this theme surfaces again in the, multiple times in the movie, the difference between how the family members handle things. And that's a huge important lesson. You have to be, it's not something that people talk about or think about, but that not just from outside, aggressors, you have to be able to be ready to deal with the people that you're with who may not be able to handle a serious situation like that. And that could be much more problematic than an outside person because of, if you can't just leave them or, kill them or whatever. So that's something you really need to think about, what you're going to do and how you're going to deal with that situation. And one of the things that hilariously illustrates this is there's a part in the movie where he ends up having to punch a gas station attendant and drive off without the gas because the guy, is scalping them on the price, but didn't tell them until after they've filled up and everything. He charges like $3 a gallon, which is what I just paid earlier today, but it's hilarious in 1960s terms. I think he said it was like 30 cents a gallon, so it's 10 times the price. It would be the equivalent of charging $30 a gallon today. And so it shows the faces of the wife and the son after he punches out the attendant, and the son is like cheesing it, and the wife is horrified, and it's absolutely hilarious.
Harry.
A little later on in the movie, as they're trying to get to their camping site, they come across a roadblock that is put up by members of a city who don't want anyone else from LA coming through and misbehaving or stealing or doing anything else in their city, and they have to drive through that area to get to the campsite that they're going to. They stop way too close to the roadblock, which is a common theme in all of these survival movies. If you see something blocking the road, you should stop as far away as possible when you first see it, if possible, and scope it out. Make sure you're not driving up to some kind of ambush. Because if you stop 100 feet from the thing, but most of the time in these movies are stopping 20, 30, 50 feet, you have no room to do anything. You can get blasted by anyone who's even a mediocre shot, and it just is not the smart thing to do. But at least they do find out that there's not necessarily a hostile roadblock, that they just want to get through, and the people tell them, no, can't just drive through, we're not letting you. And they decide to just blast through the roadblock anyway, shoot over their heads and make them duck and just keep driving. It ends up working out for them, but it's probably not the smart thing to do. I would say, hey, can you give us an escort through to the other side? Maybe try to bribe them with something. Because, first of all, if someone set up a roadblock, it's most likely going to be something, if they're not retarded, that you can't just drive through. They had just put up wooden, sawhorse kind of things. If they were smart, they would have had other vehicles parked in the road, things like that, to actually block the road. You wouldn't even be able to just drive through. But so it did end up working in the movie, but I don't think in a normal situation charging a roadblock like that would really work all that well. So they pull over to read a map, and at this point, which is another thing that is much more common in that era than it would be today. I can't even remember the last time I've seen a physical map for sale anywhere. They used to be, even when I was a teenager, it would be fairly common to see a stack of maps in gas stations for the local area. I haven't seen that in years. So they're looking at their map by the side of the road. He hears a car roaring up on them, and one of the smart things he does is to tell people to get in the trailer. Like his son gets in the trailer with some guns and he stays outside, which is a fantastic idea that most people don't do in these movies. Is everyone they have is standing right there in the same spot, so it wouldn't even be hard to surround them with even the same amount of people. 2 or 3 people would be easy to deal with. But if they don't know where you are and you're hiding, you can force multiply a lot more effectively, or at least give yourself a chance at taking somebody out. So what happens is he's looking around, this car rolls up, slams on the brakes, and these 3 younger guys jump out, and they're basically bandits. They decide that they want to, they're going to take all the stuff, do God knows what with the women and all the supplies that they have in there. And this is where he makes a huge mistake, which is another theme that seems to come up in these movies often, is that he doesn't have his pistol on him. It's just in the seat of the car, which is an insane mistake. Like I said, if I was in any sort of Chase the Van scenario, you would think that multiple guns were super glued to my body. They would never be out of my immediate arm's length. And I would probably have at least one on my body at all times, something like an ankle holster or something like that. I would never just set it down and walk away, even a few steps. Absolutely would not happen. It cost him dearly in this point, because if he had had a gun in his hand when these guys stopped the car, this whole situation would not have even happened. Instead, they jump out. I don't even know if they have a gun. They just surround him really quickly. He quickly realizes that they're hostile, and then they reach in. They're looking in his car, and they grab his own gun and hold him at gunpoint with his own gun. And at that point, then the son shoots at the guy with the gun from inside the trailer. Does a good job again. He wings him in the shoulder, and then the father at this point ends up letting the guys go, thinking that just the injury is enough of a punishment. No, I mean, that is not what I would do. At some point, if you realize that someone's going to take all your stuff, potentially hurt, murder, rape your family members, something like that, you don't just get away with a winging to the shoulder in that situation. That's it. You've had your shot. You were going to kill us. It's over for you. Absolutely. And at very least, you're saving someone else's life in the future. You think those people aren't going to do the same thing again as soon as they get away? They're going to have a change of heart. You're letting your guilt or whatever, I don't know, sympathy, whatever, cost other people their lives probably at that point. So, and at the very least, then they could have had another vehicle with gas, or at least taken the gasoline out of it. Instead, these people are going to go on to hurt other people. And it turns out this comes back to cost them dearly later in the movie as well. And what's incredibly frustrating too is, like I mentioned before, with the family members being a problem, is the reason that the kid just winged the guy is because he says that the mom actually tried to like push it or like stop him from shooting the guy, not realizing these guys were about to go, have their way with them and take all their stuff, which is absolutely horrible. Like I said, you have to be willing to deal with people who aren't on board, and you let them know in no unclear terms that they just need to sit down and shut up or they're going to die. Not long after, they come up on a big intersection where they have to drive directly across a highway perpendicular to get to where they're going. There's no other way around it without driving like an extra 50 to 100 miles or something like that. But there's this massive amount of traffic going through from leaving LA, and to the point where they can't even drive across this highway. So he ends up taking gasoline, dumping it on the road at night, and lighting it to create a wall of fire so that they can drive across. I don't think that would work. First of all, because even just a bucket of gasoline, a whole bucket, which is very precious at that point, let's say he even only used 2 or 3 gallons, but maybe upwards 5 or 6. First of all, even 5 or 6 gallons is not going to make that big of an inferno across even a 2-lane highway, and I think it shows it to be more like 4 lanes or something. And with people driving crazy, if you just start edging out into the road, which is what I would do, they're not going to just full-on ram you and destroy their cars, at least not right on purpose anyway. So if I would either try to create some kind of other physical roadblock with a tree or something like that, maybe put a tree branch on the front of your car and start edging it out into traffic until people realize, like, hey, you're just trying to cross the road, you're going to be across in 10 seconds, and then they can drive on their way. So it might cause an accident that way, but it would at least work. Whereas just lighting a little fire in the road is probably not going to work because it wouldn't be as big of an inferno as they depict in the movie. And obviously, like I mentioned, you're wasting a quite significant amount of precious gas. Even if the car back then only got 15 miles to the gallon, you're talking about 3 or 4 or 5 gallons getting you anywhere up to 75, extra miles or something like that. Was enormous. It's huge. So they get to the campsite. He does a few smart things. He takes down the sign at the turn-in, which is very smart. I would have done a lot more at that entrance as well, try to cut down some bushes and try and block off, maybe with some felled trees later and things like that, the entire entrance. They sort of do that by actually taking out a wooden bridge that they cross, which they acknowledge is only one of 2 ways, 2 ways into the campground, but it at least prevents people coming in from one direction, which is very smart. And it does show that there's a river there as well, which means it's at least a decent spot for them to get water. So it was smart of him to go to a place like that, probably. The dad makes another very smart decision by, first of all, they go to a cave that the son had found on a previous trip out there. He decides to use that as their base of operations and stashes the car and trailer somewhere else, pretty much ditches it. And he does a very smart thing by dividing up their supplies and burying them, caching them in different locations so that if someone does stumble on their spot and robs them or whatever, they won't lose all of their supplies. He even comes up with a plan saying that if someone ambushes them, they can say, hey, I know where the food supplies are, and start trying to, let the people dig them up and gives time, work their way back from the farthest out cache closer to the campsite to give them time to maybe notice, maybe prepare an ambush or something like that. It's very smart. It shows that he's thought a lot about, the way people are going to be coming after them, and potentially at least things like that, which is awesome. You don't see that a lot in these type of movies. Another thing I would have come up with is more regimented series of way to guard their little place, other countermeasures for finding out if people get close, maybe sort of blocks or traps, or even things like running challenging passwords and things like that. So if you hear someone running in the dark, you can say something, and if they don't say back the right word, then it's a potential hostile. So they realize that there's other people in the area, one of whom is the hardware store guy, who comes up on the dad, holds him at gunpoint. Once again, the son manages to get the drop on him and make him put his gun down, and they realize that they're living in their abandoned trailer, so he gives him his gun back and says, hey, and the guy, I think at this point, realizes that they're not bad people, that there's just a crazy situation, and since he let him go, he sort of goes off on his way. And the father and son are exploring to see what else is out there and whatnot, but they're very, very bunched up. This is something that's very common in these movies, is that some of it might be for filming effect, but I don't think so, because people really do act this way. Even when you're going through military training, this is how all people start when you're doing stuff like sticks lanes and movements to contact and stuff like that is that it feels, obviously you feel much more vulnerable when you're separated any distance from the guys that you're with. You know, if you're right there next to them, it feels safer, but it's actually not very smart, because a single grenade or even one or two people in an ambush can just take out your whole little group if you're bunched up together. If you want to be, 5 meters apart at least, depending on how sparse the terrain is, maybe more like 15 to 25 meters away. So at the very least, if someone gets to jump on someone, you might be outside of the ambush zone and you can work your way around, or at least it will take more than one person to hold a gun on both of you at the same time. I mean, think about it. If you're 3 feet away from each other and there's one guy there with a gun and he's just drop it, he's got you both covered without even moving. If you're 5 meters behind him, he can only point his gun at one person at a time. He might not even see you if he just sees the first person. So that can be a huge advantage. So that's something you always need to keep in mind in a situation like that. So they also find out that the guys from the gas station are in a house in the area. Not the guys from the gas station, the guys from the roadside that they winged with the shotgun, that they let get away, are now squatting in a house somewhere in the same general area as their cave site is. And once they see them at the house there, they again leave them, which I don't think is smart. And knowing those people in the area, then at least you should have taken them out at that point, and that again comes back to haunt them, because while they're gone, 2 of the guys end up finding the daughter and raping her, and then getting away. Luckily, the mother is somewhat nearby, hears her screams, and ends up chasing them off with some shots. The daughter does not have a gun, which was a mistake. She doesn't even have a knife on her. There's certain knives that you can, small knives you should carry just for a situation like that. Something like this cold steel push dagger. This is a huge one. They have little ones that are only about 1 inch long. These are fantastic for concealing on your body in situations where it's legal. Not all states and cities let you carry push daggers concealed, but obviously in a shit-the-fan scenario, you're not going to be concerned with stuff like that. But they're great for anyone because you can't drop it. It can't be taken out of your hands. And even if you don't have any technique and you're just flailing with it, you're going to cause some serious damage. And something like a K-bar LDK is fantastic for it's called a last ditch knife. And I've used those before. I have one around here somewhere. I couldn't find it. But they're very small, and the Kydex sheath is designed to, or not necessarily designed for this, but it's the way it's shaped is it's very easy to lace onto your shoes, so that it's right there on top of your shoe, laced right in, and it's not hard to at some point just pull it off your shoe, and almost no one notices it even being there in like a pat down or something like that, especially if you spray painted it the same color as your shoes. If it's white, if your shoes are white, make it white. It's already black, so if your shoes are black, things like that, they're almost never going to notice it. And you can cause some serious damage flailing with that. And these guys, I don't believe, were armed with guns in this point in the movie. So she could have caused some serious damage to them with that. So when the dad and the son get back and realize what's happened, they obviously decide to go get these guys, which is the correct thing to do. They know where they're holed up. It was, of course, not the correct thing to do to let them even get to this point, and now it's seriously cost them. So they go to the house. They do what I would do is just, there's only 3 guys there. I would just camp out and wait. I wouldn't try to breach the house or anything like they actually end up doing. I would just get as close as possible with serious cover and just wait until they come out. One of them just blast them right at the doorway, and they can't go anywhere. It was a pretty open area around the house. Have the sun cover the back or other sides and just blow them away when they come out. But be patient about it. But they decide to go into the house. They realize that the car is gone with the main guy who got winged with the shotgun earlier. He's sort of the ringleader. He's gone. They know he has a gun. They don't know if these other guys do or not. So they end up kicking the door in. The guys are sitting there, completely caught off guard. So that was good at least. And the good thing he does is he doesn't try to do anything weird. He just wastes them, and doesn't try to listen to what they say. The guy does try to throw a table at them, and so he just blows them away. I would probably personally go a little more Marcellus Wallace style with these guys if they hurt my family.
I'm gonna get medieval on your ass.
But it's probably better just to take care of business and not have to worry about anything go wrong. At that point, they realize the other guy's gone. They find a woman who is in the house who they initially thought might be with these guys, but they find out that she was the owner or lived at the house before, and they had been keeping her prisoner, basically. So they decide to take her with them if she wants, and she does decide to go with them. What I would do at this point, again, is they leave, and knowing the other guy's out there, they think that they show up, and or if when he shows up and sees the guys are gone and the girl's gone, they'll think that they just ran off. Probably wouldn't work in real life because he just blasted 2 guys with a 12 gauge. There'd probably be a significant amount of blood and stuff everywhere, which would be hard to clean up. And you know this guy's going to come back. He's not expecting anyone else to be there other than those 2 guys. Again, I would just wait inside. Just wait inside. You have 2 guys, 1 guy coming in who's not expecting it at all. He's going to be completely caught off guard. I think that would be the better play, is just to wait till he shows up. And again, this ends up costing them by just leaving. So they do leave, and they go back, and nothing else happens for a while. Realizing that there's at least this other guy out there and potentially other people, they're starting to run out of the fuel, whatever they were using for their cooking, whether that was, I don't know if it was charcoal or what, and they realize that they're going to have to start cooking with wood. And that's not a problem, other than he correctly notes that some people will be able to see the fire for miles. It'll be like a beacon. But there's several things you could do in this situation that would kind of prevent this from happening. First of all, you can just you cook at night mostly, if possible, or really early morning when you won't be able to see the smoke very far. So all you really have to do is shield the light. And that's fairly easy, a lot easier than shielding the smoke, because it's a line of sight thing. So if you build a wall of rocks or a wall of sticks and then have the other open and facing the cave, people would have to be very close to see that little bit of light reflected. And you can see an unshielded campfire for many miles, though, and because we just saw this when we were up and camping in Olympic National Park, as we were on top of one of these hills, and we could see a flickering campfire. It must have been like 15 miles away. It was pretty crazy. And obviously that was probably a pretty big fire that was unshielded. When you're cooking, you want to make the fire as small as possible to accomplish what you need, and then shield it. And there's other methods you can use too, like a rocket stoves or a Dakota pit fire, which is sort of like a rocket stove in the ground. Very simple design. And just being below ground level is shielding most of the light anyway. Only a little bit of flames are going to be flickering up above. And if you combine that with a wall or a shield of some kind, no one's going to see anything unless they're very close already. So that would be the best bet. At some point, the son is out chopping wood with the woman that they rescued. And the 3rd guy who they left behind again, who they let live, he shows up again, holds him at gunpoint. The woman manages to throw him away, to push him away. The guy throws a stick at him, the son does. It hits him and kind of causes him to shoot errantly, but he does still hit the son in the leg, and at that point the woman is able to grab the son's rifle and shoot the guy. So the guy's taken care of at that point, but the son has been shot in the leg with a .45. So he's seriously injured, obviously, and that's certainly something that could happen in a shit-hit-the-fan scenario, and you need to have ways to deal with it. And there are a couple ways that you can deal with gunshot wounds even in a shit-hit-the-fan scenario without having a doctor or anything like that around. It's super important to have a first aid kit that can actually deal with serious injuries like that, because, sure, it's nice to have Band-Aids and other things like that, but that's not what's going to make the difference in a survival situation. It's can you deal with these more serious injuries? So there's a few things that you can get, which I actually have examples of right here. Links will be in the description to all these. And first, you have options such as these clotting sponges and things like that, and Quick Clot, which is the brand here, and there's others as well. And this actually can be placed on the wound, and it actually creates somewhat of a clot for you. And it can be used in conjunction with something like an Israeli bandage. And these are fantastic. They're super lightweight, but they're much better than just a simple piece of gauze, because they include the ability for it to apply pressure to the wound itself. And I can open this for you here, because I've seen some people suggest that you take this out of the package, because it has an interior shrink wrap package as well, which works to save space, but this does have instructions on it as well, which if you're not completely, memorized on how to do this stuff, I suggest you just leave that on there, because I'll show you here. This is a small one. And as you can see, it has it shrink wrapped inside here as well. So if you're really dire need of space, you can take that out, especially if you got it down cold on how to use this. But the instructions are on there as well. And I can show you this one because I have a few of these, luckily, on how to use this. And this is fantastic because like I said, it has the ability to apply pressure with the built-in cleat type plastic thing on there. So you open this up, and this is great too because it actually is designed with this string so that once you unroll it, the whole thing doesn't unroll into the dirt and everything. And here's what the back looks like. So assuming you had the leg wound like he did, you take the gauze, and what I would do is put the clotting sponge on first to create more of an actual staunching the bleeding. And then you just wrap this around, and this string will break once you start to unroll it. So you wrap that around, you would put the clotting sponge under there, and then you can pull it in the other direction to tighten it up. And this thing actually will push down on the wound, and you want that to be right where the sponge would be. And then you can just wrap it like that. And it has a few of these strings on it that will break when you unroll it. And you want to pull this tight, but not so much that it's complete. This isn't necessarily meant to be a tourniquet. I'll show you that option in a second. And then this, when you get to the end, it has a plastic clip on there that will link through itself like that. So this is about as good as you can get for a limb. I'm not sure how great it would work on the chest or something like that. But if you are shot in the chest or torso, you can use one of these hyphen vent entry-exit wound occlusive dressing. And this is when there's an actual, wound into a body cavity of some kind, particularly the chest and lung area. These are actually sticky pads that just cover the wound itself to prevent, air from being sucked in, whatever, dirt from getting in. So you'd want to probably rinse the wound out if you had a wound solution, which is another very important thing to have in your kit. These I'm not going to open for you because there's just no need. It's just basically a sticker that you stick onto the wound, both sides, exit and entry wound if you want. And at that point, you've got a pretty serious injury. You're probably going to want to try to get to someone who has surgical abilities, but at the very least, it's the best you can do from a first aid kit standpoint. Obviously, another option is a tourniquet. This one is, I'll open this one as well. And this one is basically just like a TheraBand. It's a big piece of rubber, and it's got instructions on there as well. This is the SWAT-T stretch wrap and tuck tourniquet. So it tells you and the cool thing about this one is that it has a printed design on it. And so this is just a rubber, like a TheraBand basically, and this could, in emergency, could be used for all sorts of other stuff, slingshots, whatever else too. It's great to have multiple uses. And you see how there's symbols on here? Basically, when these skinny ovals turn into squares themselves, that's tight enough. Pretty cool design there. See how this thing right here is like a oval, and then when the diamond inside turns into a square, that's how you know it's tight enough, and you don't need to go tighter than that. So it's very simple to use because you don't have to worry about any sort of weird techniques and twisting. There's other sorts of tourniquets that may be better in some ways, but in terms of ease of use, you just pull this thing around the limb until the shapes change to the right, and then you just tuck it under. And it includes a paper to wrap to put the tourniquet time on there. You can always use blood from the injury or a marker to write on the person's forehead on when the tourniquet was applied. So this is a fantastic item with multiple uses that anyone can use. Doesn't take a long time to figure it out. It just says stretch, wrap, tuck. It's got the instructions printed right on there. Doesn't get any simpler than that. So I definitely suggest picking a couple of these up for any sort of car kit or anything like that. And even though this has been opened, I don't know if they're sterile to begin with. They're clean, but not sterile. There is a difference. Sterile is an actual technical term, whereas for something like a tourniquet, you just need it to be clean anyway. You don't need it to be sterile because you're not going to usually be contacting the wound with it directly. You're going to be putting it closer to the heart between the wound. And then sort of the best of all the stuff that I'm talking about, or a collection of it, is you can get a trauma pack like this, a Venture Medical Kit, Quick Clot. And I'm going to open this one up for you guys as well. Link will be in the description as well. This has sort of a set of all the stuff I was mentioning. It has the Quick Clot, triangular bandage, So it's a small antiseptic wipes, a resealable bag for putting all the damaged bandage or the bloody bandages in, some nitrile gloves, and some duct tape. So this is easier pack to just throw in your thing. It doesn't include the tourniquet, I don't think. So I would throw in the tourniquet and the Israeli dressing in conjunction with these. But this does give you the wipes, one of the quick clots like I just mentioned, some just regular gauze or bulky dressings as they're called, sterile sponges, so those are actually sterile. They'll mention on the packages if they're sterile. Inside here you have some tape, which can be used to secure wounds, some more bulky dressings, gauze bandage, and then the gloves. So that's a great starter kit for those, and then you can include the Israeli bandage itself, which is still on my leg, and the actual tourniquet, which I really like these tourniquets just because of simplicity. You're not going to have to worry about twisting something, securing it, how many times you twist, whatever. This is much easier to figure out. So include all that together, and you've got a pretty good with the occlusive dressing here. And you've got a pretty good, about as good as you can get for treating a gunshot wound in a survival situation. The one thing I would add that I don't have here with me right now is some kind of sterile wound wash. It can just be sterile water, or it can be the type that actually has antiseptic properties or whatever. It's something to just get debris and dirt out of the wound before you put all this stuff on it. And that's a fantastic basic trauma kit that you could have for a situation like that. And if they'd had that, this kid would have stood a much better chance of surviving. He does survive in the movie because they're able to get him to a real doctor and then later to a medical military base to get an actual blood transfusion. So this video is running a little long, but I just want to show you the great way of dealing with gunshot wounds. So we got the Israeli bandage, the occlusive dressing, these fantastic tourniquets, and the basic trauma pack. And all those together, I think, make a fantastic way to deal with, oh yeah, the Israeli bandage, to deal with a gunshot wound in a survival situation. About as good as you're going to get. And the links to all those will be in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and let me know what you think about the movie and what you think about the lessons to be learned from it. And I'll talk to you guys later.